Hello and welcome to Source Fashion. It's day one. I'm catching up with all the speakers from the catwalk. I'm here with Jasmin Malik. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jasmin is the climate and labour editor at Sourcing Journal. So she sits at the intersection of climate policy, labour rights and sourcing strategy, which is great for us. She took to the stage today. She's going to take the stage tomorrow. And this is just an opportunity to talk about the conversations in more depth. Jasmin, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Can I please ask you to do a little bit of an intro about who you are and how you've got to where you are?
Yeah, so I'm the climate and labor editor at Sourcing Journal, and I write mostly about the apparel and footwear supply chain through the lens of climate change, sustainability, and human rights. So basically, I write a lot about garment workers, what garment workers are going through, what brands and manufacturers are doing about extreme heat and other impacts of climate change. And basically, we all chip in for everything else.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot that you're uncovering, I can imagine.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So you're often, you're talking to brands, you're kind of having a view on the world that others probably don't see. What do you think has changed most in the last 18 months? What do you think's really changed?
Well, in the age of Trump 2.0, a lot has changed. Talking about tariffs have really, rejiggered the entire supply chain from like where we source our clothing from to just the expense of things and output costs. And a lot of the impact has fallen on the shoulders of garment workers because of the least ability to bear the brunt of that. Because when costs are being cut, you're talking about prices being cut. That leads to wages being cut. So I would say that has been the most enormous impact that we can see, not throughout the global South. From countries like Vietnam and Cambodia, East Africa. Because with the termination of trade deals like AGOA, which gave them free trade abilities and duty-free access to the United States and Haiti as well. That agreement has gone. So it's really a bit of a chaotic mess right now.
Yeah, I think that's very succinct in how you put that. I think it leads in quite nicely to the panel that you spoke on earlier, where it was addressing the S in ESG. I guess, why do you feel as an industry that's something that's easy to be sidelined and not talked about as much?
Because it's really about capitalism, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the dollars and cents, and it's easy to ignore a woman who's sewing out clothes for 12 hours a day in some country that you've never been to. It's very easy to distance ourselves because of that physical distance.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do you think that there's, I feel like from a consumer perspective, it feels like there is more of an onus being put on the social impact from a brand perspective. But do you think there still exists a gap between what a brand commits to doing to what they're actually doing?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's, you can have the perfect code of conduct, but if you're not enforcing that in any way, if you're not mapping your supply chain and realizing where the labor hotspots are, where the risks are, nothing is going to change. And a lot of it hasn't because there's been such an emphasis on cost rather than well-being.
Yeah, and so how did you, if you could, kind of rip up the whole system wishfully, is there a way, where would you start, I guess, to try and start bridging that gap? Because it's obviously a huge topic. I don't think we're the only industry that's talking about it, clearly. But how do you think that we could even start kind of making change, I guess?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about purchasing practices at my panel. And I'm on it's my opinion that, fixing purchasing practices would solve like 90% of our problems. Just like figuring out, allowing factories to know how much they're producing, what they're producing in as much time as possible so that they can plan for it, as well as just not putting the squeeze on them and not, saying lower cost, because the margins are like 1% to 3% right now. There's nowhere else they can go. There's not much they can cut unless they cut wages. And that's where we find the problem that we're in right now.
And I think that it's tricky because when you're kind of talking to leaders in the space and business people in the space, it's hard not to talk about the money. And it's kind of everything that's driving everything. And I think I guess my question to you would be, if I was, someone within the buying community or in the sourcing community where I'm an individual who's like, what can I do on a small scale to help enact change? Is there something that you think that there's a piece of advice you could give them?
Yeah, source from factories that have unions. You have union representation, promoting freedom of association and collective bargaining. That can help so much because the workers have a voice, they have an outlet. The problem is brands don't like sourcing from places with these unions because they think, costs will go up. We'll have more strikes and more problems with the workers, but that is totally not the case. I mean, if you want to have a meaningful relationship with workers, find places that have unions and good, strong representation.
Okay, that's a really good tip. You're also on a panel tomorrow, and that's talking about how to make circular models more commercial, or how to make them commercial in the first place. A big challenge or a criticism maybe that kind of comes up from people when they talk about kind of ethical and circular models is that it's very hard to scale. Yeah. Do you think that's true? Do you think it's a misconception? And have you seen examples of where it's worked well that you could share with us as well?
It's very tricky because it's like, what are you talking about when you're talking about circularity?
Yeah.
If maybe textile to textile recycling, it's been difficult to scale because you need the signals from brands that they're willing to buy the product before the product can actually go into deeper production. And what we saw with Renewcell last year when they went bankrupt, even though that they were the first to really scale textile to textile recycling, the brands weren't willing to buy. So that really depends on that. Right now with policy in the EU requiring companies to have a certain percentage of recycled materials, I think brands are slowly waking up that they need to secure that source of material because there's so little out there if they want to be able to fulfill regulation requirements. And so we are seeing a lot of other companies coming up focusing on, circular polyester, for example, like Reju and Circ, and Ambercycle. And I think they're on the knife edge of scaling. It really depends on if they have the customers who are willing to buy in.
Yeah, I think that's a theme that comes up a lot when I'm chatting to people and to newer brands that are kind of starting with the ethics and responsibility at their model, at the core of their business model. They're like, how can we tell the story and paint the picture to the consumer in a better way to kind of convince them that they should be loyal to our brand and this is a worthy investment? And I think, as we all know, it is very much, it's the whole value chain that needs to kind of get involved with it and be accountable. And I think it's hard to just focus on one aspect. I think both of your panels focus on this idea of social impact versus commercial pressures. And I think that what we're really trying to do quite often here at the show, but also just in other bits of content that we do, is try and show how they can be linked, they can grow together. I was thinking that, do you think that there's actually, the fact that we're even positioning them like that, I think kind of shows them as in competition with each other. Do you think we need to start looking at it a little bit differently? Is there another way to look at it? I think it feels like the two are always at odds with each other and we're kind of forcing them to fight it out in a way.
Yeah, it's really like, what is the business case for worker well-being, right? But if you think about it, a happy worker is a more productive worker. If you're dealing with extreme heat in factories, workers cannot function if they're fainting or if they're thirsty or they're falling ill because of the heat. I know in Bangladesh, I was talking to a woman and she said, we're having illnesses we never had before because it's been so hot. And there was a really good study by Cornell and Schroders that said that productivity will actually go down and you will lose millions of dollars as a result. So that is your business case. If you don't care about the human being, you can care about your bottom line. It's interlinked for sure.
Okay, wow, yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I know we've talked about a lot of different topics, and sometimes it can feel quite bleak. And I think that you deal with stories that kind of focus on lots of different pressures from all over. What do you feel optimistic about at the moment? Whether it be with the industry, whether it be your life, what are you looking forward to?
We were talking about this. I'm such a Debbie Downer.
That wasn't what I was insinuating.
But I love my cats. And they bring me joy.
Yeah, I like
So when
that.
I'm like really stressed, I'll take a cat break and I'll like bury my face in
Oh,
their fur.
they're
and,
perfect for
And they
that.
hate that. That's the cost of living with me.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's good. And then finally, you're kind of asking a lot of challenging questions. Like, you've even spoken, you're talking to people across the world who are kind of sharing their challenges with you. Where does your drive for continuing to do so come from? I think that the world is very hard without
Yes.
all this stuff going on. So how do you kind of continue this drive? How do you avoid burnout? What are your kind of ways of motivating yourself?
I'm probably very bad at avoiding burnout.
Okay.
But it's giving voice to the people who don't have that voice. Garment workers, especially now. You're seeing union activity being criminalized. You're seeing tariffs, really weigh down on them because brands are leaving countries where you're talking about 50% tariffs, or in the case of India, the threat of 500%, which is not even a real number.
Yeah.
So these are the people who cannot speak, who are invisible to the vast population of consumers, and so just letting them have that voice.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Jasmin.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
being
much.
here, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, welcome back to Source Fashion. We're still here, it's day one. I'm joined by Safia Minney. Safia is a leading voice in ethical fashion and a big advocate for living wages, supply chain accountability and responsibility. Safia, really thank you so much for being here. Could you give us a little bit of an intro, because you've got a really interesting and colourful background, and that'd be really nice to hear who you are and how you've got to where you are.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me to come and speak and be part of Source Fashion. So I think my journey in sustainable fashion and fair trade fashion started about 33 years ago with establishing People Tree in Japan and then bringing it to Europe. I left the business in 2015 and shortly after started Fashion Declares, which is an industry-wide bottom-up movement for radical change. There are 5 key goals which stretch from actually looking at how we regenerate ecosystems and decarbonize to living wage, for example. But yeah, I think for me, this morning's panel was really exciting because, we have to start recognizing that siloed thinking isn't going to be the answer, that we really have to think about systems change, but we also have to look at the kind of practice and share best practice. Also, that without regulation, we're in an impossible situation. I think the fashion industry in the UK, especially after Brexit, actually, and that also nods to the kind of the problems that we're having in terms of misinformation right now. In a broader sense, in terms of governance and democracy, doesn't it? Because we all know why Brexit happened, right?
Yeah.
So, all of that has put the fashion industry under enormous pressure. There's we didn't think there could be a further race to the bottom, and here it is. I'm very disappointed, and I know many colleagues at Fashion Declares and Bates Wells, who put together the white paper, that Rachel Reeves, postponed closing the de minimis gap, which would have stopped the Shein and Temu parcels coming in with no tax. Because at the moment there really is no incentive to do the right thing.
Yeah.
It really is about maximizing the speed of extraction and exploitation of people.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you're speaking on 2 different topics, but actually they're very, very interwoven. So we don't need to talk about one we have to talk about one, we'll talk about the other as well.
Okay.
So today you were talking on a panel where it was discussing the idea that the S in ESG can often be sidelined and forgotten. And then tomorrow you're talking on a debate which is about how can we convince and suggest that large retailers and brands need to avoid volume buying. And I guess I wanted to ask you to kind of put that in a plain and concise way of showing why those 2 are interwoven, and why do we have to talk about both of them in the same kind of conversation.
Well, sustainability isn't only about decarbonisation and regenerating ecosystems. The stewards of our land, the small-scale farmers, the growers of low-impact materials, all of those incredibly important future fibers are really key, and the wisdom and indigenous knowledge that goes with them is really important. But I think, to your question about, and I've just finished a doctorate looking at what a post-growth system looks like in textile and fashion. And it really, I think, is about craft. It is about looking at the craft of small-scale organic farming. It's about the craft of hand weaving, which is, for example, the second largest sector after agriculture in India. We can design and produce products where the labor component might be 3 to 5 times more than if it's just produced in a factory, and the end result of the product is absolutely beautiful. So when we're talking about, as science is telling us, to cut production and consumption by between 75 and 95%, that leaves 5 to 25%, then we really have to think very carefully about how we produce that remainder new fashion. And I do believe that switching to low impact materials and using craft and really redistributing wealth through those systems, through those new economic models, is the answer.
Yeah, and I think also, I know that you're very passionate about the skills and the work that goes into creating a garment, and I think so much of that is forgotten. So much of that people don't really, I don't know why, but people don't value it as high. I guess if you're not looking at it, then you don't really think about it, which is when it comes to the consumer right at the end, you're not really seeing how those stitches are made, how the buttons are put on. You're not seeing the actual craft work going into it. I know that some of the work that you've done with Indolisi, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because how you're working with the craftspeople and how you're working with hand weavers and what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. We started Indolisi really to provide market access with very, very experienced craftspeople and artisans that had amazing skills. These were groups that I developed at People Tree. I left the business in 2015, but when People Tree went into liquidation in 2023, they were keen to continue to access the European market and to work with brands that care. So we've developed this amazing line. We only started in April last year, and we already have many stockists that have taken us. The e-commerce site is a lovely platform to really engage with craft. But I think also, I'm doing something with the British Council looking at the creative economy and the craft economy in Delhi next in a couple of weeks' time. And I think, we can sometimes forget, in the UK and in Europe, that actually craft is really alive and kicking.
Yeah.
And, there are many, very, very powerful designers now in India and other parts of Asia that are really celebrating craft and bringing very unique, proper eco-lux to the market. And, I'm really excited. It's nice to see that there's some of them here at Source Fashion, and I hope that, next year we'll have more still.
And where if people are interested in kind of seeing more of this side of craft, where could you suggest them start even looking?
You mean in brands or
in
shops?
both, in brands and shops, yeah.
Well, definitely visit the Indolisi website, but we're also sold in Percy Langley and Upper Street in Islington and Fair in Brighton and fair.com. So, there's lots going on. And we're looking for really brilliant, thoughtful, conscious, caring brands that we can collaborate with, put together, beautiful capsule collections in the same way that we did years ago as People Tree with Selfridges and with Topshop. We know it's possible. And we would just love to do it.
Yeah, amazing. I think a really something that I hear a lot as a challenge to this kind of model, this kind of brand, this business model, is that it's very difficult to scale. And I don't know if that's just a misconception, or is that something that worries you? Is that something that you think about? What do you think about that kind of criticism?
Well, I think 20 years ago that was true. It was difficult to get organic cotton onto the hand looms. We did that. It was difficult to find YKK zippers to put into beautiful dresses so that, they were smooth and wearable. But actually all of that is possible now. And if you think of the the millions of hand weavers, what they need right now is infrastructural support. There is, these are climate solutions. This is where, as we've had nature solutions, we had lots of funding going into renewable energy, nature solutions in terms of biodiversity loss, soil health. We now need to start investing in craft communities and the craft economy. And I'm very excited because actually I do feel that there have been brands and initiatives that have tried to mainstream hand-woven product. I think with the Clintons, I think probably, would have been 15 years ago or more. I know they brought hand-woven shirts, for example, from Bangladesh into Walmart. So, I mean, it can be done. But of course, it needs to be done, properly, with the right storytelling, with the right design, with the right quality. And of course, it's not as cheap as synthetics that are made in a machine.
Yeah.
Nor should it be.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a big difficulty, is trying to convince people that there are cheap, unfortunately, options out there, but they aren't the good choice to be making when you are a consumer. And I think I see it with my peers, I see it in myself, I see it as a person within the society, is the way that you're being marketed to is sometimes really, really aggressive to choose the wrong choice, if I'm honest. So I think it's obviously there's a lot that needs to be considered and there's a long way to go, but saying that, I would like to ask you, you seem fairly optimistic about the future, which I'm really happy to see, but is there something what are you most optimistic about, I guess, happening in the next 5 years within the industry?
Well, I think there's no shortage of solutions. That's the great thing. And if you look at Regenerative Fashion Report, which is, it's on my website, for example, maybe we can link it. The films that we made, we can see that, the solutions are there. Many of these progressive social enterprises or businesses are really happy to share the how-to. The question really is just to kind of listen, to share, to really engage in those practices. So, and again, you need a regulatory framework around it so that there is an incentive to do the right thing as opposed to just an incentive to extract and to exploit mercilessly. So, we do need to frame it. I'm very impatient with Rachel Reeves, and I really hope that the government will embrace some of the very, very important ideas in the Fashion Declares white paper. Yeah,
I agree. Well, thank you, Safia. Thank you so much for covering all of that with us. Thank you. You're back again tomorrow, and I appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, Amina.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Source Fashion. I'm here with Matthias Knappe from ITC. Welcome.
Thank you.
So Matthias was on a panel earlier this morning, and we're going to chat to him a little bit about that, a little bit about ITC and who he is. So Matthias, could you give us a little bit of an intro? Who are you? What's led you to be here today?
Okay, yes, with pleasure. So I am leading a team in an organization which is called the International Trade Center, which is a joint organization of the UN and the WTO, and we do trade promotion, export development for developing countries in many sectors of importance to developing countries. But textiles and clothing is a very important sector in many countries. You go on a shop floor, you see many different developing countries. No? So, but as an organization, we also do other sectors and we do a lot of cross-cutting issues like women empowerment, gender aspects, youth, environment, and so on.
Okay.
But me and my team, we do work in various developing countries to try to improve the competitiveness of the textiles and clothing sector in these countries. And we're doing this by working directly with enterprises, mainly small and medium-sized enterprises, because we are in the UN system also the lead agency on SME development. And then we work with the institutional ecosystem. So all these institutions that somehow support the sector. That could be the association, that could be universities, that could be training institutions, that could be cleaner production centers, and so on. So helping all them to make the sector overall in that specific country more competitive.
Okay, you've got fingers in lots of pies. That's what it sounds like, all over the place.
In terms of textiles and clothing, yes.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's not only one thing; it's many things.
Exactly. You have to cover the whole ecosystem, as you said. So, what are some of the developing countries that you're working with?
Well, that really depends on the donor funding that we have.
I see.
Right now, our focus is on the MENA region, so Middle East and North Africa, where we work in Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco.
Yeah.
We do work in Sri Lanka.
Uh-huh.
Brought a couple of Sri Lankans to source fashion. We also do work in Sub-Saharan Africa, where we do work in Tanzania, in Ethiopia. They're also here. We do a little bit of Kashmir and Nepal. They're also here, and we have started a project in Guatemala.
Okay. So do you work alongside a lot of brands as well? You're talking to brands daily as well as the people who are working within the developing countries, or?
I think we should. We don't do all the time.
Yeah.
And there's also a good place to meet some buyers, brands. What we actually do, we work on a daily basis with manufacturers.
Right.
All the time.
I guess a question what I really meant was, what kind of questions or what would you like to find out from buyers more so to make your job easier? Is there some gaps in your knowledge and some of the manufacturers' knowledge that you're like, if I could have all these people in a room, what would you want to ask them?
That's a tricky question, but what we would like buyers to brands to look at is, okay, or tell us, if you are not buying from a country, why don't you? And what needs to be done in order to start buying from that country? Macro stuff, but also, and more importantly for our work, is actually enterprise-related stuff. So, or if you are already sourcing from Sri Lanka, say, why do you only source from these big companies, MAS, Branding, Hydra?
Yeah.
What would it take for you to consider buying from smaller companies that are less experienced, but with our support, could become good suppliers?
So what kind of brands are you working with when you are dealing with retailers? Are there any examples that you can give us, or is that proprietary information?
No, I will not give you any specific names.
Damn, that's so close.
But so among the donor community, so these governments that give us some funds to support sectors to create exports and then jobs. That's the purpose. The main purpose is we help companies to create additional jobs for countries.
Yeah.
Those donors more and more ask also, what can you do for our business community?
Yeah.
How can we work together? How can you work together with ITC also with this private sector of our country? And this includes brands, but this also includes textiles manufacturers, it includes machine manufacturers, it includes service providers. So there is a kind of a tendency to work more and more, say, with a wider textiles and clothing ecosystem in a developed country, in a donor country, including brands. But for us, brands are the most important, because that's the ones who will buy in the end from our clients.
I mean, it sounds like a very complicated job. I will say that. I will also want to ask you, Matthias, a little bit about this morning. So you were on a panel talking about the S in ESG. So it's something that as a platform at Source Fashion, we really care a lot about, and we want to make sure that we're covering the topic. I think it's often an area that gets sidelined. And I guess I wanted to put that to you and get your opinion on maybe why you feel that is the case. I think there's obvious reasons, but I guess I wanted to see what you thought.
Yeah, it's more or less the same question as this morning, which I said. Maybe there's less attention given to the S right now, but it's certainly not a neglected area. Because all the audits, all the voluntary sustainability standards that exist still mainly focus on the S. But the public opinion and the public discussions has been shifting towards areas that are more widely covered. The environment is covered under the EU Green Deal. It's covered under the COP. You have a meeting every year. It's not only, and for social you don't have anything. You have the climate change discussions. There's nothing similar on social aspects. So that's maybe is a reason why it has been less, what do you call it, popular, not less in the limelight recently. But I think it's for brands and retailers and also for manufacturers still a key aspect. The other thing is it's less tangible. So we can't really measure that well. Environmental stuff, you in principle can measure everything. CO2 reductions, resource efficiency gains,
Yeah.
cost reductions. On the social side, it's more complicated. And that's maybe a reason why it's not so much in the limelight since the last few years, maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit tricky because I think I don't know about you, but I think it's a part of the ecosystem that can be challenged and criticized quite a lot. But then sometimes you can almost bog yourself down with, I don't know what the solution is as well. So you kind of feel like you're going round in circles a little bit. And I think that, I guess I wanted to ask about the panel again this morning. Was there anything that anyone brought up that kind of surprised you, shocked you, or was there any viewpoints that made you think a bit differently?
No, I think this discussion, it's core of our discussions also what we do, or core of our work, what we do with developing country manufacturers. No, we also need to make sure that they are behaving in the correct manner, be socially, environmentally, or otherwise. So in that sense, not. I think what not surprised me, but I think what came out, which is an important topic, is that of purchasing practices.
Yes, yeah.
Because this is something that, for example, if we would like to work with the manufacturer, we cannot address. We have to address this from the other side. Because there have always been this blame, or there's always this auditing is from one side to the other. It's not both sides. But the problems often has been created on the other side. So when we work with companies, we work with them on compliance stuff, call it compliance, social environment if you want. Lean and productivity and lead times and all this, traditional thing, but we also work with them on pre-production, pattern making, product development, sometimes design, and then on the post-production, that's source fashion, that's how can they find now clients to sell more, to create more jobs. But how these clients impose certain things through their behavior on companies has not been really discussed that much.
Okay.
There are initiatives out there. ITC is part of these. We are collaborating with the Sustainable Textile Trade Terms Initiative and the International Apparel Federation to give manufacturers, so those are actually also a voice. Because overtime, for example, is also a problem created by changing decision making from the demand side, as an example.
If you were to rewrite the way we did the session this morning, or if you could have your ideal session on our content stage with a mix of manufacturers, a mix of retailers, a mix of your wish list, let's say, what would you like that to look like? What kind of things could they discuss?
No, first of all, the composition, and you mentioned it yourself. For the composition, for me, and that's not only here, that's multi-stakeholder initiatives as well. There are all these big brands, and maybe there's a few big global manufacturers there. We're working with them also, but that's not representative of the manufacturing community. So, first of all, the composition. I think manufacturers should be part of these discussions because they are affected. And then, well, it depends a little bit on the audience, no? If you talk larger brands which have a certain approach, they know certain knowledge about the topics, then it could be a kind of a more detailed discussions, also more technical topics. If the audience are manufacturers that don't know that much about certain topics, or it's the smaller brands from the UK that don't have ESG or compliance people in place, the discussion would be different. But for me, it would be interesting really to have something on purchasing practices.
Okay.
Specifically.
I'll note that one down. Thank you. Thank you for doing my job for me. Okay, well, Matthias, last question I wanted to ask you, I guess, is what keeps you optimistic? I think there's lots of challenging conversations you're probably having. Your job sounds very difficult. What keeps you optimistic about the industry and the next couple of years?
Well, first of all, I think the optimistic part is that we see improvements in the countries we work in and the manufacturers we work in. I had a couple of discussions with some Sri Lankans this morning, so we had been working with them on environmental stuff. We have been working with them on process improvements in factories. which also then improved social compliance aspects. And we work with them on marketing. And one sees the market and the booth already better than was before. And we also see improvements in business practices. If I can report to our donors on the return of their investment, that would be how many exports have we created, how many jobs have we created, and what has been the impact on how we have initiated change in the sector in certain countries. That's something that's very positive.
Yeah.
But this, of course, in the small environment. No, we work with 30, 40 companies per country.
Yeah, wow.
So it's not 4,000 or 6,000 companies in Bangladesh, for example. It's a little bit different. And we see things happening on the ecosystem. In Sri Lanka, we introduced circularity as a topic. Circularity and what can you do with post-industrial waste?
Okay, amazing.
Another topic is
Yeah,
very interesting for you.
it is. Very, very interesting.
We do a lot on this.
Okay.
And we create a lot of expertise, and companies are starting now to look into the waste stream. Not post-consumer, too complicated. But at least post-industrial, what to do with this waste.
Yeah.
See that traceability and find ways to create a new industry.
Exactly.
The recycling industry. Yeah? So these are things where I say, okay, that energizes me.
Good, motivates you. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it. And I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for getting involved in the discussions, and thanks for talking to us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Always be nice to be with you.
Oh, thank you.